Malcolm Kenyatta, Democrat for PA Auditor General, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why are you seeking this office?
You know, I fundamentally believe that government should work, and it should work for working people and working families. And it's why I ran for the legislature all those many years ago, because I grew up in a working poor family. My dad was trained as a social worker right at Temple University. My mom trained as a certified nursing aide, spent most of her career working in home health care. They separated when I was young, and so what that meant for me is, you know, lived a bunch of places by the time I graduated high school. Got my first job at 12. Was the beneficiary, frankly, of a government that recognized there's so many Pennsylvanians who are working hard but still need support. So I had CHIP. That was the way I had health care. We knew what it meant to put our names on that long list for affordable housing or to need SNAP benefits. And whether or not those programs operate at a high level where people can see, touch, and feel the impacts in their life, that matters. It's not a hypothetical conversation or an intellectual exercise. It is a brass tacks reality for so many families, and I'm committed to making sure those programs are there, just like they were there for me, and that they operate at a way that really shows respect to the tax dollars of everyday Pennsylvanians.
For those who may be unfamiliar, can you describe the role of the Auditor General?
See, I'm shocked that everybody wouldn't know. It's right on the tip of their tongue. No, the Auditor General, you know, can be one of the more obscure roles in state government, but boy, is it important. At its core, the Auditor General does two things. The first, to make sure that tax dollars aren't being stolen or misused in violation of the law. But then the second piece of this, the really exciting part in my view, is to also ask the question, okay, well, we made these investments of our tax dollars, our money, in our name. What the heck did we get for it? Did we get a good school for our kid? Did we get the ability for us to live in communities that are safe? Did we make it a reality that seniors all across our Commonwealth can retire with a level of dignity and decency? That's what's on the line for everyday working people. And I truly believe that it's time that we have somebody be the watchdog for Pennsylvania families who understands what it means to be the underdog.
What experience would you bring to this role?
So like the previous Auditor General prior to the incumbent, he had been in the legislature like me for 6 years. And so I don't know why it happens that way, but it seems to be a bit of a trend. But my time in the legislature working on allocating the billions of dollars I've been discussing, and also being in a position where I'm engaging every single day with my constituents and being able to communicate back to them some of the important work that I've done on the Finance Committee, which oversees all of Pennsylvania's tax policy, or the Commerce Committee, which oversees our community and economic development programs, or the State Government Committee, which not only oversees our state elections, but also many state agencies, as the name implies. And so I think the experience of being in the legislature, understanding where money is going, and also, frankly, prior to coming to the legislature, working at the Chamber of Commerce of Greater Philadelphia, where I worked with business owners, small mom and pop micro businesses, and large corporations. I think these multifaceted vantage points make me particularly prepared on day one to provide the type of oversight that Pennsylvanians deserve and, frankly, I think are demanding.
Before we get too far into talking about your campaign, let's talk about you. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
So back to Temple University. You know, Temple has a little motto, Temple Made. And for me, that is so true. My parents literally met on campus. I was born at the hospital. I grew up, though we bopped around a lot, have primarily lived in that area. And then I went to school there, and it is, you know, a special place and an incredible community of people who, just like my mom, just work their butts off, know what it means to come home with feet that ache and hands that are sore. But then you look at what's in the bank account, and it's not matching up with the work that you're putting in every single day. That's not fair. It's not right. And I think whether you're in North Philly, where I grew up, or you're in Elk County, or in Scranton, or in Greene County, it doesn't matter where you are. I think there's so many working Pennsylvanians who aren't getting a fair deal and who want to see their government focus on them, and not just folks who are well off and well connected. They're fine. We need to focus on the families like mine.
What inspired you to get into public service?
I always say it's really not complicated. I was a little poor and I was pissed off about it. I wanted to understand how and why it could be that my mom, who worked with folks who had really significant physical limitations, mental health challenges, how she could spend every day making sure her patients got their medication on time, only to come home and have to ration her own insulin. How was it okay that, I went to a school, there's schools all across our Commonwealth, where teachers were going into their pocketbooks to buy the things that needed to be in the classroom. How was that right? And I really just got involved initially as a public advocate, not with the intention of running for office, but with the intention of asking experts and policymakers, hey, focus in on these issues. When I ran for office, and I still believe it now, eradicating deep poverty is the moral and economic issue of our generation. When we have people who cannot care for themselves, even when they're working, not only do we all pay for that in terms of the additional investments that we need to make in those safety net programs and the loss of tax revenue because people don't have those family sustaining wages, but there is a basic dignity and decency that people deserve to have. And in the wealthiest nation that has ever existed and in the best state in the country, Commonwealth, in my view, I truly believe that Pennsylvania must be the best place for people to live, work, retire, raise a family. And the Auditor General gets to cut through the noise and make sure that the promises that are made by elected officials are promises that are actually kept.
You mentioned that you are a current state representative, and you have previously also run for U.S. Senate. How did these campaigns, what did they teach you about the current campaign you're on now?
A part of what you learn is that, boy, do I wish my bill with Representative Jared Solomon overhauling our campaign finance system, boy, do I wish that was the law of the land. Because unfortunately, Pennsylvania is the wild, wild west of campaign finance. You are able to raise and spend unlimited amounts of money. My opponent in this race has just one guy who can effectively fund his entire campaign. I mean, you think about that. And you think about the amount of time that elected officials have to spend not talking to voters, but spend on the phone asking, folks for money. For me, that average donation is about $100, but nevertheless, you're making a bunch of calls. And I think we'd be much better served if people could spend a lot more time talking directly to voters or talking to you and engaging in the serious conversations about how we can deliver on the things that I'm talking about today. So that is something that certainly, sticks out. But the other thing that I'll say that is so incredible is for far too long, we've had people who run for political office with the strategy that if I can just divide folks up by region, by race, convince folks that if one part of the Commonwealth was getting less, then you would have everything you need. Or that person doesn't look like you, they have a different hairstyle than you have, they don't worship at your church. Our neighbors are not our enemies. They're actually the way that we solve big problems when we turn to each other, not on each other. And I've spent a lot of time going to every single corner of this Commonwealth, and in this general election revisited, I think so far 63 of our 67 counties. I'll hit the other 4 this weekend, and continue to talk directly to voters about the pain points that they have and about the aspirations and the hopes that they have for a government that is laser focused on them.
President Biden appointed you to chair a presidential advisory commission. Tell us about that group and how you were chosen.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you pick up those numbers that are blocked numbers. Because, I got a call from the White House asking if I would be, willing to be vetted to be on this commission. And then I got a call later saying, actually, would you be willing to chair the commission? And it was an incredible opportunity. Somebody smart who's watching PCN can fact check me on this, but I'm certainly one of, if not the youngest person to ever chair a presidential advisory commission. And it's about education. And I was really grateful to do it because prior to this, I was selected as a part of the prestigious Hunt Keene Education Fellowship. It's a bipartisan fellowship to give people a scope. When I say bipartisan, I was in the same cohort as Governor Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas and now Governor Hobbs, who was then Secretary of State in Arizona. And a part of what we were focused on is how do we get past the political noise and invest in our young people in ways that give them the educational outcomes that they deserve, across parochial, private, public, charter. And it was an incredible opportunity. And when the president asked me to lead this advisory commission on advancing educational equity, excellence, and economic opportunity for Black Americans, say that 6 times fast, I knew that was an opportunity for me to take my commitment to investing in our public schools, investing in our families and our young people, and the really broad and deep conversations that I was having as a part of that fellowship, and help to convene some of the brightest minds in the country and provide good feedback to not just this administration, but feedback that can be instrumental in future administrations.
Now back to questions about your race for Auditor General. As the Auditor General, you would be able to do special audits of your choosing. What would you like to audit that isn't currently being audited?
One of the things, unfortunately, that's happened under the current administration is he closed down the Bureau of School Audits, which I think was a massive mistake. Listen, I will tell you, I am incredibly proud of the work that I've done with my House colleagues, and frankly, in a bipartisan way, to pass the single largest investment in K-12 education in history. We did that in this past budget. Big deal. But like with any investment, I'm certainly not a leader who believes, well, if we invested money at something, it's working great. We have to follow up the way that you would on your in your private investments. You follow up to say, hey, what are we getting? What's the ROI? Did the dollars that we invest actually result in outcomes for our young people that they deserve? And so I've committed to rebuilding the Bureau of School Audits on day one. And when you ask particularly about the special audits, one of the things that we have to look at are the quality and the safety, frankly, of our school facilities. It is not lost on, I'm sure, many of your viewers that Pennsylvania has some of the oldest stock of school facilities in the nation. We are in a position where there are so many young people, just like in Philadelphia, where a day after opening schools were closed. Numerous schools were closed for the next 3 days because they didn't have air conditioning. What are we doing? What are we saying to young people that we're not even going to provide for you to be where we are mandating you to be? And we're not going to provide a space that is free of lead, asbestos, and mold. And so I'm proud that in this budget, we did set up 2 new grant programs to deal with lead and asbestos and to deal with immediate repairs. But the money that we appropriated is not nearly the sum that we need to address these concerns. But the other challenge we have is I don't know that there's anybody who can give me the one number of how much it would cost to deal with deferred maintenance or to deal with some of these environmental crises like asbestos and mold. I don't think we have that number. And so an Auditor General could go and look at what the maintenance plans are for each school district to understand whether or not and how they're looking at funding these concerns, how this grant program I mentioned is working, and how we could further invest to ensure that all of our young people, our babies, are going to schools where we know they are safe and cared for and getting a quality education.
Your website mentions that you would create PA's first Bureau of Labor and Worker Protections. What would that bureau do?
Really excited about that because part of what I believe is that leadership matters, and I'm a big believer that we need to look at things, topically. And so what I mean by that is I think we have to take a step back and ask the question and use the tools of the Auditor General's office to answer the question, how are we standing up and protecting Pennsylvania's workers? And so a part of that is going to be doing compliance and special audits, looking at how the Department of Labor and Industry is actually enforcing the laws that we have on the books. People should get a dignified wage if they get hurt on the job. The protections that they have in law, those protections should be being enforced. We should be doing everything we can to make sure things like wage theft and wage splitting and misclassification, that those things aren't happening. But it also means protecting people's pensions. One soapbox I could get on, I'll come back to have this conversation about pensions. A pension is not a gift from an employer. It's not a gift. It is a benefit that people have earned and that our seniors depend on. And I know that you've probably reported on, or at least been engaged in, as we all have, watching the challenges that we have at PCERS, our public teacher pensions, where there's been an ongoing federal investigation into what is happening there. And we should all be concerned when we are not adequately protecting our pensions of our municipal workers, of our teachers, of our state workers. It is wrong for workers to be concerned that they won't be able to retire with dignity, and it's wrong for them to be concerned that we're not even going to enforce the laws that are on the books. We have to do that, and the Auditor General's office is to make sure that state law is being enforced, that departments are complying with the things that are on the books, and I'm going to ensure that we do.
Your website has many references to working class families. I know you mentioned, your mom worked very hard for you growing up. What would you do to help working class families and people like your mom if you were elected to Auditor General?
Thank you for asking that. One of the things that we have to do is we have to deal with, I think, the major areas that all families are concerned about. Education, we spoke about. Obviously, having a family sustaining wage and ensuring that you're protected and respected on the job. We spoke about that. But the other piece of that is being able to retire with dignity and decency. And you can't do that if you don't have a place to do it. And one of the things that we've done in the legislature, using some of the ARPA dollars, was to invest in a program called Whole Home Repairs. That program has been really a lifeline, frankly, for so many seniors in particular. Now, it's administered differently in different counties. It may be called something different in different counties, but brass tacks, the funding was to help people make emergency repairs, to deal with that roof repair, to deal with, siding, some other issues that you may have in your home. And the reason that's so critical is that we know that there are a lot of people, particularly on fixed incomes, who will have one of these critical repairs that's a lot more expansive than they can afford, and they'll end up selling their home for pennies on a dollar. When you get to an age where you're lucky enough to retire, you certainly shouldn't be worried about whether or not you can stay in the house that you raised your family in. And so it's my commitment to look at some of those programs and to ask the question, did that program work or not? And if it did, then the legislature and the broader public should be demanding that those investments are made in things that are actually making a positive impact. If they didn't work, then we should stop doing those things and invest those dollars in things that are going to make a positive impact. And that's what the Auditor General gets a chance to do, to look under the hood, kick the tires, and make sure your government is focused on and delivering for you.
The House recently passed a bill on pharmacy benefit managers, and your campaign released a press release that you said your opponent, who's the current Auditor General, quote, belatedly agreed to look into them. Why do you believe what took so long?
You know what? Unfortunately, and I know this will shock folks watching PCN, but sometimes people who run for political office play politics. And, this is not Malcolm's opinion, okay? This is in his own press release that after myself and many others, Representative Benham, who led the bill that we just passed on this, said to the Auditor General, you really need to look into these pharmacy benefit managers. And for folks who aren't familiar, the pharmacy benefit managers are the middle people that sit between the big pharmaceutical companies and your local pharmacy. And because of the profiteering that we've seen from these middle folks who haven't been passing on the savings, who have been using all types of gimmicks and games to actually in some instances, increase the cost of prescriptions and certainly increase the burden on our small pharmacies. I mean, folks should think about just this one statistic. Just as we're sitting here right now, over 140 small local pharmacies have closed in Pennsylvania this year. And these are not only small businesses, but they are a part of folks' healthcare teams. And, everybody doesn't want to go to frickin' CVS when you have a local pharmacist who is, who you've known for years, who knows your medication, who calls you before you need that prescription refilled and make sure you have the support that you need. Now, that is a bipartisan issue. If you look at that bill, House Bill 1993, which Representative Benham was the chief sponsor, the third name on that bill is mine. It was a bipartisan bill. we worked together to make some reforms. And we had hoped that the Auditor General, if he was going to do a report, would put out one that was free of politics, that actually looked at the facts, and put out a report that could be helpful in us making additional reforms. Instead, the problems that were present in this report and the main criticism that you've heard since the report was released was that on basic definitions, he conflated definitions to try to create sort of a sensational report that missed the forest for the trees. And as Auditor General, my commitment, listen, I'm running as a Democrat, but I'm not running to be a Democratic Auditor General, Republican Auditor General. I'm going to be an independent, tough and fair voice. And I think it's a part of the reason my campaign has been supported by Republicans, by Democrats, by members of law enforcement, by firefighters, by teachers, because folks know that if I've proven nothing in my time in Harrisburg in the legislature, I'm not afraid. And I will certainly speak up when I see things that are wrong. And that's what we need as an Auditor General, not somebody who's waiting around for legislators to tell them to do their job, and then do the job subparly. We should kind of just do the job and then do it well.
You mentioned being supported by, all different types of people. You were endorsed by Republican Congressman Jim Greenwood. What does it say that your campaign received bipartisan support like that?
I hope what it says is that, I'm a passionate guy and I'm making no bones about it. But what I've always done, and I say this in committees, and so folks who watch PCN can go back and look at it. I say this in committee all the time, that we should fight just as hard on the stuff we agree on as the things we disagree on. And I think what frustrates the public is not this idea that people elected to office have different views, right? That's why we get elected from different areas. But what people are frustrated by is the fact that common sense things, that if you walk down the street and ask the average person, they would say, oh, of course we should be investing in our schools. Of course we should be enforcing our labor laws. Of course we should be auditing all of our schools, public, private, charter. Of course we should be standing up for working people and not just people who are well off and well connected. Of course we should have roads that are safe and bridges that we can drive over. Now I go down that long list to just make the point that I think in my time in Harrisburg, I have a record, frankly, of trying to work with everybody I can to get those things done, but also holding the line when people want to try to take advantage or screw over working people. We really deserve better. We deserve more. And I think because of that commitment to be serious, to be substantive, I think it has allowed us to earn a type of broad-based support that I'm really proud of.
What are some other concerns you've heard from voters while on the campaign trail?
One of the things that you hear all of the time is just a general sense that there's nobody in government that's actually there to get things done, that all of it is about getting a clip of yourself on the news. And I'm certainly have had a clip of myself on the news. I'm interviewing right now. But what I've also understood is that when the cameras are off, when you're in those committees, when you're in caucus meetings, when we're deciding, that is when people actually need folks to step up and speak up and be there for them and to produce the types of serious results that folks deserve to see in their lives. And if we don't address that, certainly not just as a Democrat, but you've heard a lot of conversation about protecting our democracy. And to me, that's not just about addressing the lawlessness and violence that we saw on January 6th, but it's also about addressing the very valid frustration that people have across the political spectrum, that nobody is in it for them. If we don't address that, if we don't give people a sense, that's why, frankly, I don't say this to be solicitous because I'm here, that's why PCN is so important. That people can just hear what the heck is going on and see in their real lives that government is actually delivering for them. And if we're not going to deliver, if we're not going to do something good for people, then we should leave people the heck alone, right? That's my sort of view. And that is my commitment, to use this role to highlight when government's not working, but to also show people, not using rhetoric, but using quantitative research whether or not government is working, because data is the language of government. It's the lifeblood of government. I like to remind people, we're never funding your kid's school individually. There is a whole complicated formula where we're using different data sets to filter those dollars down. And so if you don't have, you've heard the saying, bad data in, bad data out. We have to make sure we are asking the right questions, that we're demanding answers, and that people of Pennsylvania can look at their government and grade and judge how it's delivering for them.
We have only a few minutes left. Take the last couple minutes to tell the people of Pennsylvania why they should vote for you.
Well, I would say directly, I know what it means growing up in a working class family to need and to deserve, as we all do, a government that is laser focused on working for us. As we've discussed today, my commitment has been to rooting out corruption, to rooting out waste, to making sure that we are doing everything we can to make Pennsylvania the best place to live, work, retire, and raise a family. That starts with your kid getting a high quality education in a good school, and with you being able to drop them off and go to a good job that's family sustaining, and be able to come home to a home that you can afford in a community that's safe. Now, you've heard a lot of people run for office who say those things, but the difference is, and the importance of this job, is that the Auditor General, my entire job for 4 years, if you give me the chance, would be to make sure that those promises that are made to you by elected officials are promises that are kept. Not Malcolm's opinion, but looking at the data, looking at the results. As Auditor General, I'm committed to doing that. And I'm committed to coming back talking to you about the progress that we've made, if I'm lucky enough to earn the support of Pennsylvanians who are watching and those who maybe aren't watching.
Malcolm Kenyatta, Democrat for PA Auditor General, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.